Welcome everybody to the Songbird Sessions podcast. Every episode we sit down with some of the most inspiring women in the music industry to find out what makes them tick.
We're your hosts, Danielle Matthews
and Marina Peish,
co-founders of the LA-based music platform Songbird Sessions. You can find us on social media at songbird_sessions.
Enjoy the episode. Okay. Are you ready, Frankie?
Okay.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
How are we today?
Oh, we're good.
Who have we got here? This is Frankie, everyone. Full of love.
Says hello.
Frankie is a new addition to the fam.
Yeah.
So
say hi. Oh, hi, Betty.
How have you been?
Oh man, it's been a week. Just busy. I went back to work full time, my day job. And so just trying to find some balance. It's been overwhelming after having a year of kind of a free-flowing schedule. So yeah, it's
getting back into a routine.
How about you?
Yeah, good. Similar. Well, I've kind of steadily kept up a bit of pace with the old work.
I'm going to bring the mic close.
Well, I guess what I've been doing is the COVID pivot, the live stream. So I've been doing a bit of that of late. So I've got a planning for a shoot that's happening this week. And I actually took a couple of days off and went to Los Alamos this week. So
I mean, good for
I'm
you.
Feeling rejuvenated and ready.
Yes, I love it. And live streams. So the guest we have on today that we'll be talking to shortly, you met on one of your live streams.
I did. I met her, I think it's about a month ago now. We did a Ashniko show together for her Jimmy Kimmel show. So I'm super, super pumped to talk to Misty because I met her on set, and she was just one of those people who you meet her in one circumstance and then you start talking to someone and you realize there's just so much more.
Yeah.
And
well,
she's really, really good guest.
I'm really excited for everyone to hear this conversation. We would go into like touring, mental health. She's been in this industry for
20 plus years.
So she's got a lot of good stories to share, some good tips, information, what it's like to be a woman in touring in the music biz. So I hope you guys enjoy this interview with Misty Roberts.
Yeah. Okay, great.
I like your sign.
Thank you. Welcome to the Songbird Sessions headquarters.
Hi, Misty. Welcome.
I like it. Hi, guys.
So where are you, Misty? You look like you're in headquarters.
I am. I'm in Los Angeles at a podcast studio called Brickyard. And this is kind of where I base myself out of these days.
Nice. Well, I'm super excited to have you on today because we met, I met Misty on set actually for a live stream show that we were doing with this really cool artist called Ashniko. And it was for her Jimmy Kimmel live performance, which was on a few weeks ago. So if you haven't checked her out, check her out because she's a really incredible artist. But on a side note, I got to, because we're in COVID times, Misty was our COVID compliance officer.
Amazing.
We were having daily tests. And we just got to chatting one day and I found out that there's a hell of a lot more to Misty. And I was super excited to, chat a little bit more and introduce her to the Songbirds fam. So Misty, you've been in music for quite some time, like production coordinator and touring manager for 20 plus years. Tell us what have you been doing?
Everything.
Yeah.
I started in my early 20s, and I tour managed smaller, like van and trailer theater sized acts for the first 5 or 6 years of my career. And then after about 5 years, I finally got to see a tour bus.
Is this in LA? Where are you originally from?
Originally I'm from Kansas, out in the middle of nowhere. A tiny little small town.
Nice.
Yeah. Yep.
So what was the music scene like there?
Believe it or not, I grew up near a town called Lawrence, Kansas, which is a big college town. And in the mid to late 90s, when, the alt rock, onslaught was happening, Lawrence was actually a big hot spot.
Oh, wow.
For, tons and tons. I saw I hate to be one of those people who's like, I saw them before they were cool, but like,
But you did.
I
Just
saw
be
Pearl
honest.
Jam and Nirvana playing clubs.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
God.
So yeah, it was everyone always loved coming through Lawrence. We had a couple of really cool clubs called the Granada and the Bottleneck.
Yeah.
And there was a very DIY underground place called the Outhouse that was outside of town that
Yeah.
later turned into a strip club.
Oh, cool. Okay. All right.
But yeah, it was
COVID pivot.
it was actually like a hot spot back then, and that's kind of what got me interested in all of it. Like I kind of feel like anybody, like a lot of us that are in this industry are kind of the deviant ants that didn't really follow what society necessarily told us we were supposed to. And
Oh, yeah.
that's where I found my comfort, was in those people, in those clubs, and sneaking into clubs underage and getting to know the door guys so that I could see the cool band that was in town.
So did you know back then, like when you saw, well, not back then, I mean, it was only a few years ago, right? That when you saw when you saw Nirvana and Pearl Jam, did you know, you're like, yeah, these guys are going to be huge? Was it that kind of feeling?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's something about that. You see that X factor, whatever it is in people, like you're like, those guys are going to be stars. And I got really lucky because we actually had a local band called the Get Up Kids that are kind of known as like pioneers of like the emo music scene.
Oh, I know who they are.
Yeah, like hugely popular. They were from my hometown essentially. And so, we were around the same age, and I got to see them traveling to like Japan to go on tour. And I was like, I want to do that.
Yeah.
Like, I can't play music. I have zero musical talent whatsoever. I can't sing. I can play no instruments.
Same.
Like
No.
there has to be a way to be able to get to do that without having musical talent.
Yeah. So what was the first thing that got you into it? Did anyone help you start, or did you have a mentor, or what did you do?
I got super drunk at a show and introduced myself to a local band.
How it always starts.
Awesome.
Yeah.
If you ever need any help doing anything, let me know. And they did. Eventually we got to be really good friends, and they were doing a showcase in New York City, and they said, hey, you know what? We're going to drive, obviously, because we don't have any money, and we have to take all of our equipment. Do you want to come with us? And I was like, that sounds amazing. Absolutely. So I hopped in the van, and I think we left on like a Thursday night and drove from Kansas to New York City, did the showcase, and literally turned around and drove right back.
Wow. And that was the beginning.
That was the beginning. It hit me. I was like, this is what I want to do. Like I always had loved traveling. I didn't do a lot of it as a kid in Kansas. We were definitely not financially stable enough to like take family vacations and things like that. So I didn't really leave Kansas until when I was in college. And that was really like, that trip was really my first time of really going somewhere on my own and going, yeah, this is what I want to do. I want to wake up in different places every day and explore and see the rest of the world.
Yeah.
As a little kid sitting in a trailer park in Kansas, you kind of feel like it's out of your reach. And I think that was the moment I realized how in my reach it actually was.
Yeah. It sounds like from the bands you've described, it was very much a boys' club when you started. What was it like being a woman in that environment?
I think, on my smaller tours that I did in the beginning, it was, I was the sister, I was everybody's sister. And there was definitely there would be 4 band guys and me, and that was it. I settled out shows, I sold merchandise, I helped load in, I helped load out, I did the advancing, I did a little bit of all of it. And I think that, the guys that I was traveling with at that point probably would have taken a bullet for me. It was that close because you live in a van together.
Yeah.
Everything about each other. When I moved up into arena touring, it was definitely a little different.
What was that ship like?
That's when it was huge. It was huge. going from being, one girl in a van with 4 guys to being on a tour that has 100 people and being one of like 3 women on the entire tour.
Wow.
It was intimidating, first of all. You go in the first day and you don't know anyone, and you're meeting 100 people and you're not sure who the locals are, who the touring people are. And then you realize that you're kind of a target because you're going to spend the next 6 months of your life out on tour with 100 guys that you might be the only woman they see all day long.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
So you kind of, I've often compared, like, I've often said that it's relativity. Like, guys on tour will be like, oh, our production assistant's the hottest chick in the world. And I'm like, it's because you haven't seen another woman in a month. Like, the harassment when I was young. And so like in the beginning of it, I kind of took all the snide comments and, whatever. I didn't take them to heart. I don't think that I knew what I had to offer as a woman quite yet. And I think that I took it more as compliments.
Yeah.
I was like,
100%.
I told me my ass looks good today.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and now I look back at that and I think about how fucking gross it is.
I think a lot of women are in that position in every industry. We've all experienced it where you're like, well, they're saying something positive about my physical appearance. I should take this as a compliment. Yeah. But looking back, you kind of cringe and realize that wasn't okay. What about my credentials?
Yeah, on that, I'm going to bring something up. I watched this movie last night called Moxie. It's like a new movie by Amy Poehler. And look, it's more aimed at teenage women as opposed to little teenage girls. But I kept watching it because the thing that I found the most interesting was it's finally a coming of age story movie, set in a high school, which so many American movies, I love a high school movie still to this day. Anyway, but it was about educating women that all of these comments about like being rated by men, such as, they had this, it opens up with like the boys have finally sent out the list, and the list is rating the women in the school of, who's the most, got the best ass, who's the most fuckable, who's the most this, and then who's the most scary or obedient or, and them, this one girl in the school realizing, hey, this list is actually really not okay. So kind of, I'd like to like just chat about like at what point do we realize that, hang on a minute, like this conversation, like this list that you think is okay to send out, it's about educating men as well. Like it has to start, somewhere, and say, hey, like dudes, we don't do that to you. It's really like, you're seeing us, it's the male gaze, it's that whole thing. And especially today being International Women's Day,
yes,
I think it's a good conversation to have. Like I thought it was a cool movie to see that aspect being taken as as opposed to the usual.
I have this conversation a lot because I think it was probably around 5 years ago, after being on the road for a really long time. In the role that I was in, I was usually the only, it's traditionally a woman role, a production coordinator, production assistant.
Because we're really good at organizing.
Right? In the touring industry.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's usually only one of me. And so I found myself getting more and more frustrated every day and not having anyone to vent to, because all of the women that I knew that did what I did, we were in competition with each other. Who's going to get the next great big tour or whatever. And I started a Facebook group and it was selfish. I tell people all the time, I'm like, it had complete selfish motives. I needed to be able to talk to other people about the very specific things that were happening in my day-to-day job. And it grew and it grew and it grew, and it became, it's a group called Women in Touring, and it kind of grew outside of the scope of production coordinators and assistants into just women as a whole. And in the last 6 months, we've started the conversation of how do we get men more involved in these conversations that we're having, because nothing is going to change until men also are educating themselves on
100%.
what it is that we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean,
And
it's one thing we, uplift and empower each other and support each other, but if we're not also at the same time educating men in how to be a part of that conversation, it's kind of null and void,
Yeah.
Completely. Yeah, I feel like we did a really good job in the beginning of it of, building that sisterhood bond and like giving each other outlets. And, now we've moved into, we had like a summit. We started 2 years ago, I guess. We had our first Women in Touring Summit. And then we did it again the very beginning of last year, right before shutdown happened.
Yep.
And so now we've kind of moved over into Clubhouse, trying to, keep these conversations rolling. And
we just did a Clubhouse, my first time on. Yeah, it's very new to it, but it's a great platform.
Yeah. I love the aspect that it's finally a social media platform that's not based on how someone looks.
Same.
Yes.
What you bring to the table is what you have to say, and there's not any way around that. And I think that's wonderful.
You can't swipe left or right.
No filters.
No filters.
But we had that conversation a couple of weeks ago because we considered bringing a couple of men on as the panelist. And one of our members was like, I don't want to listen to men talk anymore. And I was like, no, well, to be fair, equality means for both parties. It doesn't just mean for women. So we can't turn this into a scenario where it's you want to also then stifle the male voice. Female and male both bring a certain thing with them into a conversation, and you need both of those things to further that conversation.
Agree.
So we definitely had a pretty deep conversation about, okay, is it time to start bringing in those male voices so that we can start, we want them to hear what we're saying, because it's not going to change until, we can stomp our feet and we can throw our hands in the air all that we want.
Yeah.
But we have to face the fact that there are still a lot of men in hiring positions and firing positions.
Yeah, absolutely.
And those people need to hear from us, and they need to hear our point of view.
Yeah. I mean, we come up not against this, but this is a topic for us as well, being Songbird Sessions, and our platform is to uplift women in music specifically. And it wasn't for a purpose of like, we just want to exclude men and we're sick of hearing about men. It's literally like there's been not a lot of other platforms in music, especially in music, and especially right now, that's just to showcase these extraordinary women that work in the industry. But I've definitely been asked before. It's like, when we first started, I had a few people say, oh, can I invite my guy friend along to the show? And I'm like,
of
yes,
course.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And so, like, come and this is the point. Like, we want you to come and see these incredible women. Like, they're incredible talents. And look, men have had, it's just so happens that they've had a lot of platforms in their lives before. And we just want to showcase,
trying to level the playing field. And we collaborate with men. We partner with men who want to be a part of this conversation, who are as passionate about it as we are. And we want to include them in this.
Yeah. It's, to me, that's the most important thing, because people sometimes, I think, forget that, like I said, equality means equality for both.
Yeah.
Now that means maybe 50-50, not 70-30, or, like, where we need to amplify more of those female voices, because it's not 50-50.
100%.
It's not a fair field. And that's not saying silence some voices and amplify others. It means let's treat each other fairly across the board.
Yeah.
And it's important to have things like Songbird Sessions. Like, you're right. There hasn't been that same space provided for women that there has for men. And, it may seem like here's a woman thing, but what it is no, here's a platform that we're going to give women the same chances that men get.
Exactly.
And
we couldn't have said it better. Thanks, Misty.
Yeah. And it's not like with our shows, and this is more about when we were doing live shows. It's not just about, women at the shows. It's creating a safe environment for women that are attending the shows and that are performing. And this has been a big conversation last year within the LA underground music scene about the shows and, are they a safe space for women? And I'd actually love to kind of shift this to, I know you're a big advocate for mental health.
Yeah.
And that has been a big issue within the kind of underground music scene, within the music scene in general. So I'd love to hear how, especially being in the touring business, the late nights, being surrounded by a lot of men, the little comments, how you take care of your mental health, and when you realize like that was really important to focus on for you.
It took a really long time.
Yeah.
I've known for a really long time that I struggled with mental health issues. You know, I mean, I can tie it even back to high school, but I was like, oh, I'm just a moody teenager. That's what we do. And I feel like what I found something that was my niche, and I found this little world of people that were the same kind of outsiders that I was. And so I clung onto it, and I was like, this is how everybody feels, right? Like we all feel like this. So it's normal.
Yeah.
And as I started to get into bigger tours, my focus shifted. You know, it shifted from it just became like I thought about work constantly. You know, I avoided personal relationships. I let friendships go by the wayside. I was so tunnel vision focused on I want to be the best that there is in this industry. And part of that came from because of a lot of those comments and whatnot out on the road. I had a lot of those moments of like, I have to show these people that a woman can do this.
Yeah.
And I found myself super duper wrapped up in this world that nothing mattered to me except for the next tour that I was going to get on. And I hit a point of I'm not even sure what you call it because it was so far past burnout that I don't even know that there's a word for it.
Right.
I had a year that I worked for Metallica and Bruno Mars at the same time. So
Wow. That's a big year.
I would go out and, you know, be out with Bruno for like a month, and then Metallica would have, you know, a 3-week tour in Asia. So I would hop off of Bruno and find someone to replace myself and hop over to Asia and do the 3 weeks with Metallica and then go right back to Bruno.
Right.
I think I had 7 days off the entire year that I
Oh
spent
my.
in my actual like
God.
own home.
And I'm sure just even basic things like sleep fell to the wayside, and people don't realize
Wow.
how important just like sleep is.
They don't. And, you know, it's one thing that definitely pandemic has taught me is this is the first time in 20 years that I've woken up in my bed, my own bed, for longer than a month at a time.
Wow.
And like the entire concept of having a sleep schedule where my body wakes up on its own
Yeah.
was so lost on me. I like the first few months of pandemic, I was like, is
Did
this
you have the
what people
shakes?
do?
Did you have withdrawals?
I kind of felt like I did. Like
Yeah.
it was just a really weird space. And you know, I mean, I've been working for a couple of years like very closely with a therapist that she's a somatic therapist, and she focuses on how your body reacts to stressors.
We were talking about this
and how
last
it-
week.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it literally, I think it changed my life. I hit that burnout point, and like I was physically ill. I kept going to doctors. Nobody could figure out what was wrong with me. You know, it went from lupus to you have an infection in the lining of your heart. You
Wow.
might have a brain tumor. Like it was all
Oh my
ends of the
gosh.
spectrum. People
Have
were
you
like,
read
every
there's a
doctor I
great
went
book
to was
called
like,
there's a great book called The Body Keeps the Score that I just read. It's how trauma is stored in the body, and it can show
Yep.
up in physical
Absolutely.
illness. But
incredible.
yeah, it's a great breakdown of, you know,
That was the
where
first
you
book my therapist had me read.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it's a requirement for every therapist, but I think it's kind of making its way out into the
Absolutely.
general public because it's a huge topic right now.
It is. And I don't think that I had recognized or realized, like, I mean, everybody's like, oh, I had a rough childhood, but it's fine. I'm fine now, you know, and you don't realize that that stuff is stored inside of you for so long. And then when you couple it with treating your body like shit out on the road and not sleeping and taking care of 100 people and
And not
never
yourself.
having anybody take care of you,
Yeah.
you know, you're going to break. And, you know, I had my point and I broke and I came home from a tour, which I had never done. I'd never thought of the idea that I would leave a tour because I didn't feel good.
Yeah.
But it was so far past I didn't feel good. It was, I mean, it got dark. It got really, really dark.
Yeah.
And, you know, I finally got up the courage to reach out to a therapist. I also started to go and see a homeopathic doctor, which changed my
Oh,
life.
amazing.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like when, you know, I came in and I remember just like throwing this bag of pills in front of him. And I was like, I've been to 13 doctors in the last 8 weeks and this is what's happened. And
Wow.
nothing's working. And he was like, let's try a couple of really easy things. Like, let's figure out if maybe you have allergies. And I was like, wait, it can't be that
Allergies?
simple. I was like, it can't be that simple at all. And it ended up that, you know, I was living in Seattle at the time and I had moved there like a year earlier. I was literally allergic to Seattle.
Wow.
I was allergic to pine trees. I was allergic to mold. I was allergic to grass. Like,
Oh my
all
God.
of these like everyday things that you don't think about here in LA because, you know, it's pretty dry and
I'm
things are
allergic to LA. I don't know how that's happened, but
She said that multiple times. Yes.
yeah, I had bad allergies last year, which I'm hoping are going to be okay this year.
I'd never experienced it before and didn't realize how crappy it can make you feel. Like,
it's the worst.
Yeah. But then I also realized like through that too, that, you know, a lot of the reactions that my body was having were trauma and things that I hadn't dealt with. They were panic attacks.
Yeah.
You
So
know?
are you looking forward to going back on tour, or is it kind of a little bit of triggering for you? You kind of like, or is it just different with COVID and you've kind of reframed how you're going to do it?
You know, I wouldn't say that it's triggering. What I would say is that I've worked really hard for a couple of years to figure out my resilience and to figure out that resilience doesn't mean putting up with everything. It means knowing your boundaries and
learning how to say no.
Learning how to say no. And I'm really hoping that when touring starts back up again, I mean, I've worked on some other stuff that I'm able to survive and thrive doing other things. And I don't want to go back to touring if it means working for a group of people I'm not in alignment with. I worked too long and too hard to get the skills that I have. And I feel like I only want to go on a tour that I would be able to offer those to people that would appreciate them.
Well, we're going to do a Songbird Sessions tour in a few years. So, Misty,
I love that.
We'll definitely keep in touch. Yeah, I think it's definitely shifted, especially in the past year with all this time. You know, before it's like you had to choose between yourself and the success and whatever path, you know, you're on. And now it's like there is a balance. And you don't have to sacrifice one for the other.
No, you don't.
You kind of can't. We're realizing that we can't actually.
We did so many years with people telling women you can't have it all. Yes, you can. You absolutely can. And you can say no to people. You know, like I've said no to quite a few like CCO gigs, you know, where I met Marina, where I just went, that doesn't sound like fun. You know, these people don't seem like they want to play by the rules. So I'm just not, I don't have to do that. So I'm not going to do it. You know, I go out and I do those gigs when I want to. And then I have the podcast studio here and, you know, I have a great podcast partner and we do an everyday, like 15-minute pop culture podcast. I've actually learned to tap into the fact that I have creativity myself and I've spent 20 years supporting creative people and kind of giving away a part of myself or shoving a part of myself down going, okay, there's not time at the end of the day for your own creative things that you want to do. And, you know, then this year hit and I was like, wait a minute. Yes, there is. You know, you just have to make it. And, you know, literally for I think it's like 170 episodes every day, weekday. We
Wow.
run this like 15-minute fun,
Yeah.
like not topical, just like thinking back to things like in the past that made you laugh and made you smile. And, just giving myself that space of being able to take my mind off of everything else going on for 15 minutes. It's taught me, okay, you can meditate for 15 minutes in the morning and a half an hour at night. Like you can take that time and do those things that make you happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Marina and I, we both work full-time jobs, and Songbird sessions, we find the time in our schedule to do it because we both love it so much. But we are also make sure to check in with each other. How are you doing? Do you need this week off? It's okay. Because I think we both understand there are going to be weeks when we can't be 100% in one area or the other. Which I think, helps us and helps Songbird sessions.
Yeah. Isaac and I do that too. He's the guy that I podcast with. Like,
by the way, this podcast is so fun. I've tuned in and I love it.
We have so much fun doing it. Like I said, it's just been really nice. I mean, obviously, there's so many things going on right now that are really heavy and deserve all of the attention that they're getting. But it's really nice to take a 15-minute break from it, and to actually 100%. Just record it. And like, all of this stuff is stuff I had no idea until, July of last year when I walked in here. I didn't know how to edit a podcast. I didn't know how to turn on a mixer and, a switcher and all of these things. I didn't know how to set up a microphone and headphones. Like I didn't, I spent my 20 years in an office organizing logistics to get 100 people back and forth to places.
Yeah.
So, I got to, it's fun to like tap into the creativity of it, but I've also like realized, even though that I am over 40, like that was probably the most daunting thing about all of this is like when pandemic hit, I'm like, I'm 43 years old. Like how fuck do I start over right now? Like what do I do? Where do I go? I have all of these weird skills that people are like, I don't really understand how that translates in the real world. And I'm like, neither do I. So I was able to like come in here and without even realizing it, just out of doing something that just seemed like fun, learn a whole different set of skills for myself. That, like I said, now it's kind of at a point that I'm like, I don't have to go on the next big gigantic pop tour for the next year and a half and, completely disrupt all of this progress that I've made for myself. I can do other things and I can balance all of that out and go to bed at night and sleep a full 8 hours.
No, I agree. It's strange to say that like in a time where it's been so difficult for everybody, like, through a pandemic, it turned all of our worlds upside down. What felt like overnight, I feel, to be able to kind of come out the end of it and go, you know what? It made me take a step back and reevaluate and prioritize my health and my time. And to be honest, things that I feel like I personally wouldn't have done, like I would have just kept going, my career. And that was always at the forefront, the most important thing. And, I think it's been great to have more balance. And I think for everybody just to kind of stop for a minute, even though it's been incredibly difficult, and I don't want to like override that at all. It's
I feel like you
have a mess. But it's like
I feel like you have the same like kind of a little bit of like a guilt factor. I struggle with it a lot. I'm like, wait, I understand 100% so deeply how traumatic this has been, and I dealt with my part of that as well.
Yeah.
But if I look back on this as a whole, if I hadn't had this year, I'm very curious to what my life would have looked like.
Yeah.
And I'm happy with how it looks. And I carry a little bit of guilt of like, wait.
Yes. I had this conversation with my therapist
and yesterday. I about that. Yeah.
I've had this conversation.
A guilt factor to it.
Yeah, I've had this conversation with quite a few of my friends of like looking at the blessing in disguise or the silver lining of this year and the growth that's come out of it. but also acknowledging how traumatic it's been, and people that haven't had maybe the opportunity to focus on their mental health or haven't had the resources. And it is, it's okay to feel a little guilty, but it's also okay to be like, maybe I came out a little better from this year and I learned some things about myself.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel incredibly like I have so much gratitude over the fact that I have been allowed to focus on some of those things, and I do understand deeply because of how I was living my life before when I did not have the time to focus on those things, so I understand it in other people, and I feel and I have such a deep compassion for it. At the same time, like I said, there's a guilt factor that comes with it, but there's also I want to be so happy. Like I am so happy for anybody in this time that has been able to like maneuver and has the resilience that they've been able to like push through it into, a different kind of space. And I think it truly shows the resilience of human beings, and not just women, just human beings as a whole.
Beings. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I would love to ask you, because when we were doing our Clubhouse panel, a lot of artists jumped in to ask this question, and maybe you could have an answer. What does touring look like over this next year as it returns? Like, do you have the scoop? What have you heard? Like,
well, actually, I did a panel the other night at the International Live Music Conference about exactly that. And there were a whole lot of people on it that are a lot smarter than I am. There was a bio securities guy that has actually helped to like reopen the airlines and helped figure out like the quarantine process in Australia. He's a PhD. And then there was a woman who essentially took a theater production from the London West End to Korea during this pandemic and put on shows and did it successfully.
Wow.
So I think that the future, this year of touring, I don't think it's going to look like anything that we've ever seen in the past. It's not going to go back to that. Everything's normal. You are going to have places like Texas, for instance, that, are going to, that are just going to open the doors. And I think that it's going to be really interesting because it's going to be a really good time for artists to actually show what's important to them.
Yes, 100%.
I think that a lot of the, the large arena touring acts, this is going to be their time to put up or shut up. It's either going to be, we're willing to spend the money to keep everybody safe, or we're not. And it's going to be real obvious real quick. I foresee a lot of like medium-sized artists, like theater artists. I think that that's going to be the hardest space to get back to, which to me kind of sucks the most, because those are the artists that have been, building that grassroots thing for the last few years. And, they're getting into bigger clubs and into theaters. I think that those are going to be the hardest shows to walk away with that artist making any kind of income out of, because of the social distancing requirements, or, without getting too deep into it, I think that it's a really dangerous idea that anyone thinks that just because the vaccine has happened, that all of a sudden everything goes back to March 11th last year, before all of this happened.
So I'm hearing like artists are going to get offers for shows. They will be there, but it's going to come down to personal responsibility. And if that's the example that they want to lead with, so the opportunities will be there. The shows will come back. But it doesn't mean that everyone's following safety protocols.
It's hard because so many artists are just itching. Like itching to get back.
Completely. People don't realize that none of these artists wanted to do this. Like that's their outlet. That's their entire, like, it's their way of, like, it's their therapy, essentially, getting on a stage and doing that every night. And, when I was doing that panel the other night, like, the guy that was moderating it is the head of one of the larger promotion companies in England. And, England announced last week, like, a road path back to reopening with a date of like June 6th or June 10th, I think. And, they have these certain markers, very similar to all the things that we've been doing here in California. It's really interesting when you look at how things are working across the world and then somewhat compare them to here in the United States. Like, Marina, I'm sure that Australia, basically you could have a 30,000 person festival tomorrow and
yeah, well,
it would be fine.
Yeah, I mean,
there's one case reported in all of Sydney in like 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And like, England has all of these, like I said, this pathway back to reopening. And, from what I gathered from the folks that I was talking to, not a lot of them believe that that's going to happen. And then waking up this morning to the news that, the CDC has had, once you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask inside anymore and blah, 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 blah. And
Oh, really? I didn't hear that.
there's a whole new set of like CDC guidelines this morning. So
well, I'm getting vaccinated on Tuesday because of my day job, and I will still be wearing a mask.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Early on in the pandemic, I did a big town hall music industry panel Zoom thing. And one of the guys on it said something that has resonated with me like throughout this entire year. He's like, we're running back into a building that's on fire. And we can sit and we can talk about like what it might look like. And, we still don't have enough research from any of the vaccines that have been administered. Like, we don't know yet. We still don't know yet. And anything that anybody says is, to me, still at a point of just guessing. And, anybody that thinks that they have this like grand plan scheme that we're going to have big festivals over the summer here in the US, like on the Bonnaroo grounds, I'm like,
no way.
Crazy.
It sounds terrifying.
It sounds terrifying. And, you have to, like, a lot of people aren't really taking into account the idea of public faith. Maybe you go to Texas and no one cares. I guarantee you, if you tried to do something here in India, people would be like, no, no, the public faith isn't there yet in any of it. And, like I said, there's not enough information from the actual science yet. We're not there. And I love the idea of like, I would give anything in the world tonight to leave here and drive to Hotel Cafe and see somebody sing.
Oh, same. Oh, Pappy and Harriet.
Yeah.
Anything. But I hope that we get to that point sooner or later. And I hope that like small shows like that, medium-sized shows are enough to like quench people's thirst and remind them that music is directly tied to your humanity.
Yeah.
And wait it out until you go to those big giant shows, and let's just not do it yet. We're not ready.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think most of the artists that, we've spoken to are on the same page. Like, as much as they miss live shows, the health and safety is the number one priority, but it's different in every state, everywhere. I know Nashville has been doing shows throughout this whole thing. And so we'll see what the future holds. And
I mean, it's gonna come back. Like, it's not something that we as humans can do without.
No, it's just gonna be the right time
without music. So
it's been really beautiful to see artists really get creative with how they're connecting with fans and connecting with each other. And this is something else we discussed on the panel is it's kind of leveled the playing field for artists. There isn't this like hierarchy of like which club you've headlined, what booker, in the city. It's just like, we're all in the same place right now, just trying to get music out in the absence of live shows. So I hope that kind of community can stay intact when we move back into live shows, that community support,
Yeah. I'm going to be so interested in, there are so many people that have met throughout this process on Zoom calls and things like that. Like I have a couple of people that I can't wait until I can meet them in person.
Yeah.
Because I've spent a year talking.
Is that me and Marina?
Yeah.
And like,
and we've met in person.
I've met Marina in person.
Oh, you know.
But like, I can't wait to see the reaction and the collaborations that come out of musicians because of this. You know, they've spent a year, you know, Zoom collaborating on things, and I can't wait to see them get on a stage and do it like in real life. It's going to be amazing.
That's another thing that I've loved to see that's come out of this whole situation is that so many things have opened up that you never used to do because you weren't in the same city or in the same country. You know, things like doing, you know, songwriters writing over Zoom now, whereas like that wouldn't have been, they'd be like, oh, well, I'm not going to be in LA for the, you know, for another 6 months, so we'll hook up then. But like, I feel like the world has opened up to each other a little bit more. And there's been, as you said, like a lot more collaborations, which has been really cool. And even things like with what we're doing, you know, like we've been able to reach out to people and artists that maybe, you know, may not have chatted to us or done something with us yet because we're, you know, we're not in their immediate, we're not in front of them, you know, we're not the biggest thing yet. Yet.
It's really funny. I was listening to a podcast the other day that they were actually talking about exactly that it opened up the amount of guests.
Yeah.
You know, when they were doing it face to face, it was a lot harder to schedule around people's schedules and whatever and get them, you know, into their space.
I watched the Gorillaz live stream, which I'm a huge Gorillaz fan, and they put on a huge show, and for a ticket, they did like what, two or three shows over a weekend. So that's all they had to give. And I'm sure they did rehearsals as well. But, you know, it would have been like a couple of weeks of their life as opposed to months of touring of their life. And they brought in so much money that, in fact, I think more than they would have earned touring over far less time. So I'm sure, you know, there's elements of that artists will want to keep, and also more people from around the world could go, you know, obviously.
I kind of foresee one of the things like with arena and like stadium touring, I kind of don't see people going right back out into like full-fledged tours. I see them doing residencies in places to where people travel to them, to a city. You know, you schedule a tour that has, you know, a week or 2 weeks in 7 or 8 major cities, you know, Miami, New York, LA, Vegas, and people come to you. And
if not, you can live stream it and you can just watch it.
Well, I see that too, being
totally
where if you're able to be in an arena for a week at a time, you're also able to then set up, you know, filming or HBO specials, Netflix specials, Hulu specials, all of that. That you can actually stream that out to the rest of the world and make money off it as well. So, I mean, to me, that sounds like the absolute ideal touring situation anyways, to be able to get my 100 people into a city and have them sit for 2 weeks before we move on. And that way, you know, you're creating a bubble still. Your risk factors go down a lot. And, you know, your locals are all the same. You're in the same spot. You're in the same hotel. You have the same transportation. You know, you're not doing that traveling in a bus every night with 12 people in a bus coughing all over each other. You know, those are just germ tanks no matter what you do. So I think I think that there's a lot of really, really interesting creative ways to get back to actual live events. We're just going to have to be smart about it.
I agree. Well, Misty, it's been so awesome chatting with you.
It's been so much
fun. So great. Thank you.
I can't believe how much time has flown already.
I know. I'm just going to talk for another half an hour for sure.
Absolutely.
But where can we find you and what's coming up next? Where can everyone tune in?
Well, what's coming up next? Same old.
Well, your podcast is one place.
Yeah. So
Clubhouse.
Misty and Ike is what the podcast is called, and it comes out every single weekday morning. And it's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can also find the video versions on YouTube, on Instagram, on Facebook, basically anywhere that you can get content. We have stuck it there.
Love it.
It's all over the place. And We have our women in touring group. We have our clubhouse chats on Monday night.
Who can join the women in touring group? Can anyone?
Anybody.
Yep.
Yeah. Women, men, doesn't matter. Come on down. Like we talk, tonight, obviously it's International Women's Day. So tonight's talk is we're just going to call on people from the crowd to tell us what they feel the most accomplished about this last year.
Love it.
Yeah. Last week we had people that had transitioned out of touring into other fields. So we had them talk about what their transition looked like. The week before that, we had production managers answer questions from people that wanted to get into the, production managing field. So every week it's something different, and it's super fun. And we've got men and women on the panels.
Awesome.
And it's just, I don't know, it's a really cool, it's really cool to know that this 20 years of all of the things that I've had to learn the hard way, that I can try and make that a little easier for somebody. It's like sharing that information and like the hard lessons that I learned. If I'm able to help somebody not have to do it the hard way, then that makes it all worth it.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, Misty,
thank you
again. Enjoy the rest of your week.
And hopefully I will get to see you guys in person at some point.
Yes, we love that
show.
At a show. That'd be fun.
Yeah. Okay. All right, cool. I'll talk to you guys later.
Bye, Misty.
Thanks. Bye.